Hi, Karolina. So I'm happy that you sent us a task two this time. Let's take a look at what you wrote in this set. So we've got the unemployment rate in Asia in 3 years. We've got 6 countries. Okay. The bar chart depicts the number of people without a job. Okay. In 6 Asian countries. Good. Okay, fine. In Philippines, China, and Japan. Let's see something. Okay. In Philippines, China, and Japan, the number of people who are not working increased from 2012 to 2014. The most rapid increase was in Japan, where the unemployment rate grew from 3.4% to 4.2. In China, there was a slight, about 0.2% increase in the 3 years, whereas in Philippines, the growth was just under 0.5%. Okay, give me a second. Let me just check your data. All right, let's keep going. By the way, it should be the Philippines. So the Philippines here and the Philippines. In Singapore and India, the amount of unemployed people decreased, not in 3 years, but during the 3 years or during the period. There's no data from Thailand in 2012, but also there, but also more people worked there in 2013 than 2014, the difference being 0.1%. In Singapore, the difference between 2012 and 2014 was quite significant. Over 0.5% of the population lost their jobs in 3 years, when in India, about 1.1% of the people became unemployed. Okay, fine. Overall, in half of the 6 Asian countries, the unemployment rate increased, and in half of the countries, it decreased in 3 years, the range of variation fluctuating between 0.1% to almost 1%. Okay, what I want to do now is I want to check your word count, because it felt like you wrote quite a bit. It felt like it was over 200 words. I want to see if I'm accurate. Ooh, it was about 200. It was 198 words. So that's fine. I wouldn't want you to go any more than this. Let me tell you what I am a little concerned about here. Just let me double check. Okay, what I found is that you didn't really mention 2013 at all. I feel like you mentioned, right, just right here is the only time. Because what it felt like to me is that you went from, let me show you, you went from 2012 to 2014, and then that was it. So that's a little bit of a problem, because it's like you're totally disregarding one of the years. I mean, you didn't completely disregard it because you mentioned it once, but that does worry me. I kind of feel like you should have said something maybe a little more about it. Okay. So you decided to organize this in, I like the way you had paragraphs. That was good. And that you had, and I thought it was interesting the way you divided them. So you decided to talk about the ones that where unemployment increased, which was the first three, and then these you did together as well. And that was fine. There were other ways, of course, that you could have done this. You could have maybe put the top three together, for example. So you could have talked about maybe Philippines, China, and India, okay, and how those figures varied a little bit. And that's really interesting because you could have talked about the different things happening here. So, for example, you had, a high figure and then a decrease, and then a major increase to the highest level of any country. Because another thing that's interesting, did you mention that at all? Let me see. Right, so take a look at this. That was Philippines, right? Okay. So you talked about how much of an increase there was, but you didn't tell me what it increased to. So you were so focused on these differences that you didn't actually talk about the actual percentage. So for me, this is not really giving us a full scope of the figures. So for me, this particular figure here at, almost 6% unemployment, that was something you absolutely should have mentioned. It's the highest figure on this bar chart. So to leave it out for me is not great. You focused more on the differences. You kept talking about, right, there was a 0.2% increase and so forth. You did a lot of that throughout this. So, that for me was focusing too much on detail and not enough on the big picture. So, like I said before, you decided to organize your paragraphs, the ones that increased and then the ones that decreased in a separate paragraph. So I thought that was okay. But I do want to tell you once again that you could have done it like how I'm suggesting. So you could have talked about the Philippines first because it had the highest unemployment rate of all countries. In fact, I don't even think you mentioned that at all, right? No, you did not. So for me, that's not good. You should have. Um, and then you could have talked about, for example, India, which had the second highest unemployment rate, okay, with unemployment at just under 5%, then just over, and then dropping at the end of the period, okay, to slightly below the initial figures. So that's all you really had to do, okay? And then, you could have talked about China, which had a steady increase from just over 4% to just over 4.25%, for example, all right, at the end of the period. But you did need to mention not so much the difference, because when we know the differences, we don't know what these figures actually are. All we know is the difference between the years. Does that make sense? So yeah, here you did it. You said 3.4 to 4.2, and that was good. But I think it's the only place you did it. Okay? So I want you to really think about this. Think about what you choose to talk about. So just to recap, I was okay with the way you decided to divide this. I think that was fine. Um, but number one, there was another way to do it. Okay. You could have talked about the highest, like the three highest, this, and this, and then talked about the three lowest ones in another paragraph. But for me, what's really important is that you focus on the figures themselves and less on the differences. Also, you need to also include more information about that middle year and don't just disregard it entirely. Okay, so it's a good answer in many senses, but as far as task achievement is concerned, I think you would not score into those top three bands because of some of the missing information here. All right, and because I think that the information you did decide to select, that is these differences rather than the figures themselves, it doesn't create a clear picture. And just one last thing to explain to you what I mean by it doesn't create a clear picture. I want you to imagine that when you're writing this or any task one, that you want to write it in such a way that a person reading it without the image in front of him or her could visualize what it is you're talking about. Okay, that's your goal. Can someone listening or reading your answer kind of map out or more or less kind of draw what it is you're looking at? If they can do an approximation of that, then you've done a good job, at least as far as task achievement is concerned. Okay, so think about that as you continue your IELTS preparation. Okay, yeah, even here, now here too. This is your overview. For me, this information does not belong in an overview. In the overview, we want to talk about the main trend, the most obvious thing, and we don't want to include data. Okay, so this whole thing about fluctuating between this and this, it really doesn't make it an overview. It just makes it another piece of data. So for me, what a good overview would have been is that unemployment rates in Asia varied considerably, with Philippines having the highest unemployment and Thailand having the least. That would have been an overview. Okay. You could have also said that if you wanted a second piece of information, is that in half the countries rates increased over the period while in the other half they decreased. You could have said that. So that's information that belongs in your overview, but definitely not numbers, information like that, data. Okay. All right, now let's take a look at your task 2, which I hope you liked, rather than the international marketing one. I do have a lot to say about the international marketing one. I know that some people find it challenging, and it is, in fact, one of the harder ones. But I have found that if you do a little just research on your favorite search engine about what international marketing is, it can be done. Do you need to prepare a little bit for it? Yes, you do. It's not, unless you're in that field or a related field, you're probably not going to feel comfortable writing about it right off the bat. But if you do take a little time to maybe look into some ideas and see what international marketing is about, it then becomes clearer how you have to write this. Okay. In any case, you did the ex-prisoners one, so let's take a look at that. So it has been questioned if people can change and become trustworthy and decent citizens after getting out of jail, and whether they should share their experience with adolescents or not. I personally believe that the best way to prevent young people you prevent somebody from doing something, committing offenses, is making ex-prisoners talk to them and warn them about the consequences. Okay, let's see that again. All right, so you did a couple of things that I liked in this introduction. You rephrased the topic and then you went straight into your position. Um, and another thing that I like about this is that you said the best way, which is good because you saw that there's this superlative here. Okay, it's not like if it's good or if it's bad. No, it's the best way. So I'm glad you did that. I did feel that the link between these two was a little awkward. Like maybe it could have flowed a little better. But as far as a general idea is concerned, it's fine. I thought you did a good job. So let's continue. Young people tend to believe that nothing bad can happen to them, and they almost feel like they are immortal. Obviously, that is not the case. Meeting individuals who have made bad decisions and are willing to talk about their past and how others should not make those same mistakes can have a powerful impact. Seeing what happened to other people often makes us realize that the exact same thing can happen to us. Okay, this is very nice, but I do want you to extend it just a little more. Let me see what you've done here. Okay, you've got some interesting paragraphing happening. Let me see one thing. All right, 295 words. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, at 295 words, you could have said a little more here. We'll talk about it towards the end, okay? It is undeniable that people who have gone through jail are the ones who know exactly, not how, but what it is like, okay? How it is or what it is like, but not this. That is why young people do entrust them how criminal life is not worth it. All right, your grammar and your vocabulary here are off, so this sentence really needs to be rewritten. What are you trying to say? That is why young people believe them when they say that criminal life is not worth it. That would have made more sense. Having that experience makes young people trust what they say and would make a real change in their lives. You have to be careful here because you've got two different groups of people here, okay? You've got the people who've gone through jail, then you've got young people, and then you've got them, and then they say. So when you say that, I don't know who you're talking about. Are the young people trusting young people? Is the they the prisoners? I mean, in a logical kind of way, we can assume who your they and your there refer to, but you do have to make it clear at some point, okay? So here you could have done it maybe a little better. This is a matter of coherence and cohesion, all right? The way you use pronouns to avoid repetition is scored in your coherence and cohesion score. So that is why young people trust these ex-criminals when they say that criminal life is not worth it. Having that experience makes young people trust the ex-cons, or it makes young people trust what the ex-felons say, and would make a real change to their lives. Okay, or in their lives. There are ample people, for instance, police, no S, or social workers who could talk to teenagers about crime. They do not have that personal experience though, which does not make them as convincing as someone who has real life experience. We're going to talk about this paragraph a lot. From my point of view, there would not be a better way to convince teenagers to avoid crime in prisons than getting ex-convicts who are now law-abiding to not gab with them. This is super informal. All right, this is how we might talk to a friend, or maybe text, but definitely not in an essay. Even though IELTS is not necessarily formal writing, you still don't want to use expressions like this. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at this. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I'm trying to, that's not what I wanted to do. All right. Anyway, I wanted to look at this. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs. This paragraph for me had some issues. Now, let's go back to the essay question. Are the best people to talk about crime? What did you tell me here? I personally believe that the best way to prevent young people, etc., is to do this. Now, you also used this word best. It's the best way. And in my opinion, when you say something is the best way, it really invites you to talk about ways that might be good, but not as effective. Okay? So I don't disagree with your decision to write this paragraph, but you needed to do a lot of things to make this fit. The first thing you needed to do was you needed to take it from this spot and you needed to put it right here. It should have been your first body paragraph, because this is what we call a concession paragraph. It's where you talk about the side you don't really support. Okay? So this is where it should have belonged. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you should have developed it a lot more. It needed much more support, much more information, just a lot more. Another thing you should have done is you should have mentioned that you were going to have a concession paragraph. Okay, and you could have done it by saying that I personally believe that while other people are effective, the best way to prevent young people from committing offenses is making ex-prisoners, etc., etc. So do you see what I did? I said this thing that while some other people are effective. So saying that, it kind of orients me to understand that you're going to tell me who else is effective, but why they are not as effective as these ex-prisoners. Okay? So if you had done that, then this paragraph would have made sense. But this paragraph definitely does not make sense here, because it's like you've just spent 2 paragraphs talking about how these ex-criminals are so fantastic, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, there are other people who are good. So what it does is it weakens your argument. So that's why this should have gone first. But like I said, you absolutely needed to talk about more. It was a 2-sentence paragraph. If you're not going to have at least 4, 5, 6 sentences in a paragraph, then don't bother. Okay? There was a lot more you could have said. They do not have that personal experience, though, which does not make them as convincing as someone who has real life experience. For example, a young person who is surrounded by gangs and drugs and sees this as an easy solution to his problems is not going to be persuaded by somebody who has always led a virtuous and legal life, such as a police officer. In fact, the police officer might be seen by that young person as the enemy, and therefore the adolescent will tune him out and not pay any attention to his warnings. Okay, so this is the kind of development I wanted here. All right, you could have maybe talked about why social workers are very knowledgeable and good, but not effective. You could have talked about teachers, why they're good, but not effective. Do you see what I'm saying? but you absolutely need to do more here. Then, um, this too, I really don't feel like this should have been its own paragraph. You want to avoid little paragraphs, okay? Basically, as a rule of thumb, we recommend having a four paragraph structure where you've got one introduction, you've got a conclusion, and in between the introduction and the conclusion, you have two paragraphs. So, what I would have done is I would have had this paragraph be my first body paragraph, developing it as I suggested, and then I would have taken all of this and just extended it, okay, with support, with examples, and with other things just to make it richer. So these are my suggestions for this essay, and then I probably would have taken this out, okay, or somehow incorporated it to make this stronger and more well developed. So that's my feedback for this set. I think you've got some good language skills. I think you have the right idea, but I do think you need practice and I do think you need feedback. So if you found this feedback helpful, then I want to suggest to you to look into some of the options to work with us. There's the online course, which is super thorough and covers everything you need for writing. And then there's the essay corrections, where we can continue to work together with different essay topics and different tasks. So see what works for you. I hope we can work together. I'm looking forward to it. Best of luck.